Did you see the big gun yet?
Saw it earlier. I can't see it now.
This review is for Trouble. On this one, we go to Ireland a few decades ago with the IRA and the Civil War. This is based on a true story, which is even more heartbreaking and tragic. We have great performances, an amazing location, and costume design that we really get to revisit this tragedy in the midst of chaos and violence in this country where the Civil War was so shaking for everyone involved, and we still have some of the later negative impacts of that situation. And it was a very well scripted film with a sensible approach to a real tragedy, and it was an amazing job.
Trouble. This had a lot going on. I liked how they started it with the kind of familial legend of keeping this finger, and then they kind of circled back to explaining the story, which probably a lot of the details of that story got lost through the generations, because that's kind of what tends to happen in families, especially when you have something so bold as like an eye-catching headline, and then some of the details of a story like that definitely can get lost when the story is told person to person, and especially generation to generation. And so I really liked that they kind of honored that with just this kind of blanket idea of, keeping this finger in this, kettle or whatever, and then going back and like getting the full context and the full story. And I think that that's really nice, because like I said, I think that happens a lot in families where some of the very important details, or just some of the details of the story, definitely can get left off or forgotten. But the story itself I thought was really powerful, and stories with war are always really, I think, emotional and impactful, just because war is never pretty. War is always has tragedy to it, and it always has this kind of ugliness where, when you have conflict on that scale, on that level, that's always going to exist. And I think that this did a good job of kind of highlighting different aspects of that, with how the bar, tavern, or whatever they're at was completely empty, and like nobody was there, and they clearly just lost a loved one, and something had happened, and getting some of those details is horrifying, and the fear is still really, really relevant, with soldiers kind of knocking on doors. And that's a lot of different aspects of war that are definitely tragic, and I think that they touched on a lot of them, and I really liked that, because they didn't focus on just like one aspect. I could also see them kind of definitely touching on a type or a version of like PTSD and maybe survivor's guilt, and I think they did a really good job, especially because this is dated. This is a period piece where those things weren't necessarily as talked about as much as they are today, and I think that they honored that really, really well.
Trouble is one of those short films where you know that the team behind it put a lot of effort, which is incredible and which is not to take for granted. This historical drama has a real dramatic feel, which is not easy to nail. They nailed also the realistic cinematography, the spot on casting, and the detailed production design. So a lot of effort, which is impressive. The opening scene is really strong and has a strong point of view. It hooks you right in with this interesting point of view that grabs your attention. Now, it does slow down a bit later on, so I think tightening up the pacing could have really amped up the drama and kept us on the edge of our seats. I love how Trouble chooses to focus on the personal backstage side of war rather than just the explosions and the actions. It gives it much richer character-driven depth that I'm all about, and today's cinema also is. So that's incredible. But I think what I was left with was this question: what's the unique angle here, both in the story and visually? Why is this different? But overall, Trouble is a solid watch. Strong cinematography, engaging characters, and a really thoughtful approach to storytelling, which is definitely something special and to consider.
In the short film Trouble, this is a story of two sisters reconnecting with their long-lost brother, and they're sort of questioning if whether or not this is a good thing or not. And because of that, it creates this tension within the trio of this mysterious nature of why are they proceeding with caution when it comes to their brother. And with the power of filmmaking, it sort of alludes to trouble, right? That maybe we need to be proceeding with caution when it comes to this character. This film has a very stark opening with this folklore warning almost being presented to the audience as we get to hear about the story of the mother who keeps her sister's finger in the teapot. And that is such stark imagery that we get to see come into play here, making us feel that discomfort that horror can tend to bring up in these gory graphic imagery. And we sort of get to see the story play out of how this has come about. And we get to see these lovely dynamics between each of the characters and how it differentiates between the two. And in the end, you get to be at this place where you have sensed this act of trouble, but you're not necessarily aware of what kind of trouble is going to show up on your doorstep, so to speak. So there is a little bit twist to this ending as one wouldn't necessarily expect. But what I found most interesting is that by the end of this film, it is based on a true story, and sort of talks about where these characters, or at least it alludes to this imagery that this could be based on a true story, I guess I should say. And it talks about where these characters ended up and family sort of sticking together despite this grief, and that just disparaging shot of this body of their sister who has been shot, with the two characters trying to simply smoke a cigarette, and how they both interact in that moment is just quite profound.